Hello, everyone. We're here for a very special Monday with Lesley Francis. We're kind of doing a biography series on Lesley because she is the host of AstroSoup, and not a lot of people in astrology really know that much about Lesley. So we've done a few grills where we ask Lesley anything and everything about herself. Today I want to do a special episode inspired by this book called The Principles and Benefits of Change. So I brought the book with me today so we could always have something to refer to. But really, I wanted to talk to you about change because, Astro Soup is going through some changes. And so I just, first of all, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your relationship to change in general. How do you feel about change?
How do I feel about change? Well, it really depends on what we're talking about. Which parts of change? Like sometimes I would. Just for full disclosure, I do have 5 plants in Aquarius, and but my Uranus. But okay, so if we're looking at whether we're talking modern rulers or traditional rulers, the traditional rulers of Aquarius in my chart, one is in Cancer and the other is in Virgo.
Hmm.
So their their response to change, again, it depends on what it is. Like for instance, um, I was just having some um, challenges with my overall physical system, and so on a dime, I just changed from cut out a whole bunch of sugar out of my diet, which was interesting because um, I think I was responding to Pluto sitting on my Venus, and I think my Venus got a little overstimulated in the I need some sweetness department. But so I just on a dime, I cut out a whole bunch of sugar out of my diet,
Hmm. Wow.
moved towards, drinking water with lemon almost all the time,
Hmm.
just to settle my physical symptoms down. Because Pluto transits are very intense. And, you know, sometimes I think that we forget that when so my planets range from zero, Mercury at zero, Aquarius all the way to 26. So people think that, Pluto has to get to my sun before I'm actually going to feel it on a solar level. If you have a stellium that's as large as mine, as soon as it makes contact, it's like it's hard to determine. So obviously, there's a deep call for change, and that's a different kind of change. And so um, I can be very resistant to change. It really has to be my idea. And I think this is the default position for Aquarius, is it really has to feel like it's in charge. So, um,
Yeah, what do you think of the fixed nature of Aquarius and change?
well, okay, so when you look at fixity, so I think it's important to also look at the element, right? So a fixed in air is not as fixed in earth. I mean, when we're talking about the most fixed of the fixed signs, it's easily Taurus. Uh, so, uh, yeah, I just wanted to say, in terms of general change, I welcome it. I just it just takes sometimes it takes me longer
Hmm.
to welcome it than other times.
Hmm.
Um, I would hate to I would hate to think that I wasn't able to take time to, after my initial resistance, to ask myself whether uh, changing. Um, I just wanted to make a joke. It's like, okay, sometimes change is fun because I try on 17 outfits before I decide which one I like. But
Yeah, changing your clothes is very different than changing your house, for example.
oh yeah, it's funny because I had a renovation done 10 years ago. I haven't the furniture is in the same places as it was 10 years ago. The furniture remains the same. I do tend to buy, because I have Leo rising, good quality things. I'm not I like there to be some level of, especially in my life with the stellium, some predictability, even if it's only the furniture is still in the same place as it was.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the changes going on at AstroSoup.
Well, it's been a really interesting process and one that I've enjoyed. Um, when I wasn't asking myself 7 questions about why is it like this. As I mentioned, I do have Saturn and Virgo, and so it's been um, a challenge to really think about what is perfection and how does it manifest. And actually, doing these grills with you has been one of the things that's really shifted a lot of my attitude towards what I'm going to be doing and how I'm going to be doing it. I haven't really lost sight of the overall vision that I had when I started it, but um, and of course, I ought to have anticipated this. Notice the word ought.
Mhm.
Um, that's
Change
not
your word. No, I'm just kidding.
no, it's a self. You ought to know better than anyway. So, he's not. Oh, okay. My brain sometimes goes in 14 different directions at the same time, and I'm left trying to catch up to it. So, I had all kinds of ideas because I always have lots of ideas. It was a case of how am I going to show up? Not, and it ceased to be as much about whether I can create the content because I've been a content creator most of my life. It was more a case of this is a new space and place for me, and so I'm looking at changing it because currently very Saturn and Virgo, it's not really functioning in the way that I think is um, most beneficial. Not just for my audience because I don't know. A friend of mine was telling me on the weekend. I can't remember the name of the guy she mentioned, who said if you're not doing what you're doing for yourself, then and you think you're doing it for other people, then it's just not going to work.
Mm.
And I believe you've told me that very same thing more than once. Sometimes it's been a great learning process and being able to change. Uh, I'm not resistant to it. I just haven't really figured out exactly all the ways it's going to change.
So it sounds like you're kind of tweaking or working because I think speaking of change, like every person that comes into the room, because you've interviewed several people on your show, and I think
Yeah.
one of the things we've noticed is that every person who's in the room changes the room. Like
Yeah.
so it's I think so. Is it changing like how much you're going to have guests on or not have? Is that changing?
Well, it's funny because I was just about to say that I realized that I needed to expand my ways of delivering AstroSoup content.
Mhm.
So it doesn't always have to be the podcast itself. So I'm really considering doing more reels and just quick spot things um, because, like I said, I have lots of segments I could do, but an hour goes by pretty quickly. Um, I'm most likely because I don't, I haven't quite formulated it all yet. Mercury's still in Pisces, so um, I'm thinking, I may reduce the number of episodes to 2 a cycle. I may have only one guest a cycle.
Mm.
Um, I some part of me wants to start another podcast
Okay.
called "Things I Learned from Falling on My Face"
Mm.
because I actually did fall on my face, uh, and I have done that also metaphorically, not just literally.
Mhm.
In fact, I look back in my childhood and I realized when I was about 10, I fell on my face when I was about 10.
Oh goodness! Wow.
Like, and I ended up with a big goose egg right in the middle, right where your third eye is.
Oh my god, no wonder you're so intuitive.
That must be that must be it indeed.
Well, so it's really interesting to hear you talk about changing the like. Okay, what I have a list here of what you're saying is like you could change the modality of which you're presenting yourself. Like a reel is very different than an hour long podcast. It could be changing. Are you in a Zoom room or are you on live stream?
Oh,
It could.
yes, well, we're still working towards that, aren't we?
Yeah, totally. And I think it's really interesting when we have an artist like you where it's like what's actually similar in everything is you. You are the locus of control in this whole thing. And so, how much does it really matter if we change from reels to like what does that change? Like to put yourself on a reel, what changes there?
Well, I think I've referenced this before that I have Pluto on a Leo ascendant, so there's always that push pull between do I want to be seen? Don't I want to be seen? And um, I think the reason I've been working through a lot of different ways of doing it is uh, like when I worked for a newspaper, there wasn't any question about whether I was seen, and it was rare that I would run into people. Occasionally I'd run into someone in the grocery store. Oh, you're Lesley Francis from the Edmonton Journal. I would go,
Mhm.
yeah, no. um, and I know it's hard. It's hard to believe that someone who is born with a Leo ascendant and an angular sun in the seventh house goes, "Why are you looking at me?" No,
Yeah.
that Pluto. Anyway, we can't blame everything on Pluto, even though I'm trying.
We can always blame Saturn and Virgo.
Well, that too.
Yeah, it's been really interesting as your producer to watch you kind of morph over. I have to use 20 synonyms for change because I don't want to be redundant here. But I've
Okay.
watched you morph, since we've been working together. Of how much will you allow yourself to be seen, and getting we you and I've talked about that concept that success is an inside job of like getting your insides ready to be shown on the outside, and there are some changes that are imperceptible to the human eye but are absolutely happening within you. I mean, that would be a really interesting question to uncover here is how have you changed through doing the podcast?
Well, time for some true confessions.
Please.
I have a therapist because after I fell on my face, I had some serious anxiety problem. And they come and they go. And I said to her, I really believe that the podcast is as much about me growing as it is about anything.
Mhm.
And I would like to say that to anybody who has the desire to create, just go for it and don't worry about whether you think, even if you think you're climbing Mount Everest in high heels, you should still do it, right?
Mhm.
And I don't know. I think that's where my five planets in Aquarius really come in handy because, you know, they're not afraid. That doesn't mean I don't have fear because Saturn and Virgo in the second house and it's retrograde. Yeah. Uh,
Mhm.
it's a case of, uh, I don't know. I feel like I've always had an inner compass that seeks to grow. And in fact, I remember this was when I was working at the Edmonton Journal, and I went to a workshop that I was covering for the paper. And I like to write about people and their lives. I've always been much more interested in that than facts. How people.
Mhm.
And so this guy was talking about codependency. So you know how long ago that was.
Mhm.
And his name was Robert Subby. And he was talking, and he was a very good speaker. And he was talking, and uh, he said something that just blew my circuits. He said, "Change is inevitable, growth is optional." I thought, what? I thought they were the same thing. And I really think that that's how I approach most things. I really think the two things are the same. And no matter what happens to you in life, it's not always what happens to you, it's what you choose to do with it that matters.
Mhm.
And that's where the opportunity for growth comes from.
Mhm.
So if you spend all of your time trying to maintain the status quo, uh, it's exhausting actually to do that.
Mhm.
And not that I'm not saying I've never tried to do that because that would be a lie. That would
Mhm.
be a lie. Uh, So we need to be kinder and gentler to ourselves, even when things smack us in the face, like what happened to me, where it literally, uh, when that happened to me, I thought, oh my God, is this the beginning of the downward slide? Because I was 72 when it happened.
Wow.
And within days it was like, nope,
Hmm.
I'm still here. I want to live a vital life. And I mean, I'd been thinking about launching AstroSoup for a long time, for at least before we launched, for at least 4 years, on and off. It would pop
Wow.
into my consciousness. And so, um, and as I've said before, you showing up in my world again after we hadn't seen each other for a number of years was really the catalyst in so many ways.
Hmm. Wow.
And and you never know what the catalyst is going to be.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
maybe for me it's because my south node's in Libra, it's usually people.
Hmm.
It's usually people.
Yeah, I think your Libra stuff's right on my Pluto North Node in Libra, so that's maybe I
Yes,
could.
we have the reverse nodal axis, don't we?
Yeah, we're growing in opposite direction. No, no, but we're
No,
helping
no.
each
See, yeah. Um, it's just a continuum as far as I'm concerned. I think that's part of the challenge that when we see all of the advances in understanding um, the cosmos, we can see that things are always fluid. Even our bodies are fluid. It's just
other. Hmm.
we don't always see it that way. I know I have trouble with it myself. So how
Well,
do those two things inform? So we came along and we crossed because we crossed paths many times before that, and
yeah.
it would have been interesting to see. And actually, we have a really nice composite chart if my memory serves me correctly, because I know you probably I know I looked at it. Um, so I don't know where I was going with that.
Well, we're talking about what changed in you through doing the podcast. And one of the things I heard you say is that you grow. I mean, they say that anything that's not growing is dying, right? Like, and I think what I heard you saying is that it's been a constant growth process for you, which is absolutely a change. I mean, I think, you know, I think we could pry there a little bit more and say, well, what has grown in you through doing it? I think a question I am interested in is how do you think that we handle or manage change differently when we're in a leadership role? Because you're the leader of Astro Soup, and so what the changes that you make affect the whole system there.
Well, first of all, um, I just want to say that Pluto transiting my Mercury Venus was actually a very interesting time to start a podcast. Um, it's transformed a lot of my sense of self worth, uh, and I did want to answer that question. So, because I think it's important that if we cannot take a look at our stuff, and it just becomes a case of rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, and I don't think that that's particularly helpful. As far as being a leader is concerned, I don't. I have, and that's a North Node and Aries invitation. Uh, it's been really a lot of fun because I mean, I've worked with clients, but I think this is actually the first time in my life where I'm taking my ideas, you know, because if you have clients, it's not about me; it's about my client. So, however I practice, of course, it's going to impact them. And so, in that way, I guess you're a leader. But in terms of starting something, a creative project like this, and I must admit that about the same time last year, out of the blue, I started writing a mystery novel.
Mhm.
So, um, now that's an invitation I could have ignored because I always never thought I would ever write nonfiction. In fact, I didn't think I was talented enough to write nonfiction.
Mhm. Wow.
So, because I'd never had that experience, and I didn't. It had never called to me.
Mhm.
I'm fond of using that because the truth is, if something calls to you on a deeper level, it's also calling for a change. calling you to shift your where you're at and what you're doing. And it has been a challenge at times being the leader, even when I'm doing the in the midst of doing the podcast, remembering that um, essentially it's my podcast. I even still have a little difficulty saying that because I'm afraid, oh my God, somebody going to think I'm that egotistical? Like,
Be more egotistical. Change. Change your ego to get bigger.
as I know you'd like that a lot, and I'm, and this is where that's been one of the more interesting things for me is realizing that uh, there's a part of me that really wants to be that leader,
Mm-hmm.
and yet in a way, I express that often in situations where uh, I gave everything and didn't acknowledge my own contribution.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been an interesting time over the since Pluto wandered into Aquarius.
Yeah. I think we can talk about the larger idea that astrologers deal with change. We're change agents in as much as we talk to people about transits. And I think, doesn't every transit seem like a change? Like, I always think of a transit as a transition, And so, like, do you think astrology has helped you handle change just because of the nature of astrology?
Well, like most people, I was attracted to astrology because I wanted to understand myself. And that's a good place to start. I don't care what anybody says. If you don't want to understand yourself, how in heaven's name can you possibly be helpful to other people if you can't be present for who you are? Um, so, it's funny because there is a topic that's been floating around in my consciousness for quite some time, and it really speaks to what the question you just asked, and it's called. I wanted to do a webinar or a lecture on rites of passage. Like, what are like this year? What's going to be your rite of passage?
Wow.
And because then it, like, for instance, right now, I told you Pluto's just passed my Venus. It was quincunxing my Uranus and sesquiquadrate my Saturn. I know I'm bringing in some minor aspects, but they can be pretty major.
Hmm.
And sesquiquadrates, I don't have squares.
Hmm.
Um, so just looking at all the way, and then Neptune squaring my Uranus, and Saturn was squaring my Uranus, and Saturn's coming up to conjunct my North Node. I don't think it's this year, but next year. But there's all this interplay of all these various energies that sometimes do not feel complementary at all. And yet, it speaks to the general experience I've been having over the last 2 or 3 months, which is a case of being able to concentrate my attention, and then all of a sudden everything just evaporates, and I can't seem to get a. So I'm just describing this for people because we sometimes want to get really what I call logical and clinical about our transits. And we don't actually want to acknowledge the transition that's taking place inside us. I love that you use transition. Um, so
Hmm.
this is where I just wanted to finish. I think this is where we sometimes can get a little bit um, rigid in astrology, and that is just uh, wanting to talk in astrological lingo instead of actually translating it into an actual experience, uh, and acknowledging, and not even to anybody else, but to yourself. But then, of course, I am a person who talks to myself, so.
Um, Interesting. So, okay, so there's in this book there he outlines four types of change, which I was really curious on your opinion on these different kinds of change. So, the first one he says is that change happens to us. So, unexpected or unanticipated things happen that affect our personal lives, families, careers, and things. So, I feel like when you fell on your face, this is an example of a change that happened to you. I mean, like all of a sudden your face is different, your teeth were different. I mean, and I think also in our relationship this year, you've had a big change kind of happen to you, and so like, I guess, how do you, as a wise, just definitely one of the wiser people I know, how do you deal with changes that happen to you?
Well, well, I think that how do I do it personally?
Yeah, like, what's your approach when things happen against your will, kind of like something is taken from you, or
Well, no, I understand. I guess it's interesting always to break things down because I tend to be more of a holistic thinker at times. Uh, well, like when I fell on my face, I realized I had a choice. But the interesting thing is, like, I'm in the hospital, and this is obviously how my whole consciousness responded to this. They gave me all of the tests. I mean, I don't remember falling. I don't remember the ambulance, right? In fact, I don't. The person whose home I fell at, she told me she was going to call an ambulance, and I argued with her as the blood is pouring out of my mouth. It's like,
Mhm.
and all my friends, like, this is interesting. All my friends said, "Oh, that sounds just like you, Leslie." I'm thinking, I don't know what you're talking about, but anyway. So I don't remember the ambulance ride. Don't remember all the tests that they did. I only came like I was in shock. I, I wasn't unconscious. I was in shock. And I only came out when I heard my son's voices in the hospital room that they had me in.
Mm.
And it was an interesting experience. That's why I'm sharing it. And I think that sometimes we have all kinds of, that was a physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual shock. But you might just have a physical shock. Like, for instance, if you cut your finger, that's a physical shock. So it was kind of like the total package. And I remember going into the bathroom and looking at myself in the face. And it was interesting because it was only one side of my face.
Mm.
And I was wearing these rockin' Maui Jim sunglasses. And I'd only had them for 6 days. And that pissed me off. But anyway, and I realized, no, I,
Sorry.
I I can't ever wear them again. I just can't. I just
Yeah.
so uh, I kind of looked at it in a very clinical way and wondered how is that going to work out? Like
Mm.
uh, and they let me go home because I passed all of the physical tests to say that I'd had a concussion and I needed someone to stay with me overnight to make sure I was okay. But it was kind of like, well, here was my response. Fuck. Like that. Did I really need this? And I even looked at the event chart and it had a grand Earth trine in it.
Weird. That's funny.
There's other things in it, but I don't. The first thing and a Capricorn rising
Hmm.
with the moon in Capricorn in the first house, and I think Pluto obviously was still in Capricorn in 2022.
Hmm.
So it was weird. I just um, I didn't feel sorry for myself. I just was pissed that it happened.
Yeah.
But then, in honor of full disclosure, I have been accident prone. I was quite a bit when I was younger. And then I had that moment of thinking that I might not be able to work my way through this.
Hmm.
But I guess there's a part of me that's always been determined, and that's where the fixity comes in. It's like, because I realized I could have given up, but I guess it's not in my nature to give up. And maybe that maybe is one of the greater expressions of North Node and Aries.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that this guy says in his book is like, when things changes happen to us, like, the wise person will make them work to their benefit. And when I watch you want to make this podcast called "Things That I Felt Learned When I Fell on My Face," it's like that would be an example of that. It's like you had this kind of hard experience, and then you would want to kind of make it work for you by using it as kind of content for a really interesting journey for viewers. I mean, I think that it's like we learn a lot from those kind of traumatic events, and I think that's kind of where you're at, is like kind of extracting the gems from that experience.
Well, and part of it is I do believe that there's a gift in every experience if you can look for it.
Hmm.
And beautiful things don't always arrive in the nicest looking packages. They just don't. And that's why, I really, um, I'm really opposed to the right, wrong, good, bad, success, failure paradigm, because it really, as soon as you put something in a category, you can shut off any possibility of you using that experience to deepen your life, to actually make it function better.
Hmm.
Um, it reminds me of, people say, well, clients, well, I just haven't had much luck in relationships. Um, and so, I say to them, well, why do you think that? Well, blah, 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 blah. And it really speaks to that life in the third dimension is not meant to be easy, but how do you choose to live your life with ease? And
Hmm.
the way you do that, I think, is to be completely aware of yourself. Like, I love synchronicity when it happens. And so I just have to tell you this because, I'll doing the podcast has brought up a lot of my shadow.
Hmm.
And so it's ironic. I love playing this particular, it's a word solitaire game because God knows I love words.
Hmm.
And half of the ads in the stupid game are all about exploring your shadow.
Yeah.
So um, our I don't know if you want to call it your soul, your spirit, or whatever, your greater consciousness is always going to find a way to speak to you, um, if you want to pay attention. And if
Hmm.
a message repeats itself over and over and over again, there's a message there. Unfortunately, I chose, or unfortunately for them, I thought I have astrology. I don't need to download your app. I don't need to download your app. Um, and changes. There's no sense in pretending that change isn't scary.
Hmm.
Uh, but we don't like uncertainty, and yet that's
Hmm.
it's a constant. And how do we choose to greet that or meet that?
Yeah, I love that point. And the next thing he says is that change happens around us. So this would be political changes. The outer planets move, in our lives. So everything changes with those outer planets and stuff. So how do you integrate political changes, as a talk show host and all that kind of stuff, when there's things happening politically and things like, how do you integrate those kinds of changes?
Well, I pay attention to what's happening. To give you a good example, this goes back to because I belong to the generation of women who um, pushed feminism forward. But after a while, I stopped calling myself a feminist, only because I thought that blaming men for wasn't going to really change anything.
Hmm.
Acknowledging what is true does. We have so much trouble trying to just calling people out for things is not the same as blaming them.
Hmm.
Right? To give you an example, when I decided I was finished in my marriage, I chose not to blame him.
Hmm.
Um, can't say he felt the same way, but because I didn't really see any point in it. Plus, I think when you've got Pluto and a really strong Pluto in your chart,
Hmm.
uh, here's how Pluto operates in my mind: gives you lots and lots of bandwidth.
Hmm.
But when you've exhausted that bandwidth, it's a surgical cut. I'm just going to cut you out. And it can be people, it can be anything. So I just reached that place where I was done, and I knew I was done, but I realized that I could have, blaming external events on your for your reality, whether it's with a one human or a large group of humans, doesn't really help. So back to talking about feminism. So I realized that the best way that I could um, be a feminist, as it were, was to live it every day of my life. To have to So that when I look in the mirror, I know I'm living a life that reflects who I am. And now that can shift and change, because coming to know yourself is a lifelong journey. It isn't something that happens to you magically when you turn a certain age.
Mm.
Um, I mean, we know this as astrologers because the planets keep moving around. They don't stop going, oh, by the way, she turned 18, so our job is done.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's an ongoing thing, and you can always be growing into something, whatever that happens to be. So, as far as political stuff, well, having been a journalist, realizing same shit, different day. And even, when I mean, I remember I grew up in a small city in southern Alberta, and they had a siren put in case there was a nuclear attack,
Mm.
which is, by the time the siren showed up, it would have showed up about the same time as the wave from the nuclear bomb. But nobody wanted to say so. Really, there's no place you can hide from a nuclear bomb.
Mm.
That's a sign of us. So, um, so early on, and then there was the Bay of Pigs and all that stuff, and then Kennedy was shot, and I remember all those things. I remember them like I was home from school the day because I wasn't feeling well. I was home the day that John F. Kennedy was assassinated.
Wow.
I watched it on TV, and I was what, 13,
Wow.
and so I know what those experiences felt like to me personally,
Mm.
but in terms of the overall what's happening, um, I mean, as a citizen of a democratic country, really, you can voice your concerns. You can vote. I vote. I try not to get into political discussions, only especially these days because everybody seems so polarized. And and when I was in the early stages of feminism, I found the same thing was true.
Mm.
Like everybody wanted you. I mean, if you had a different point of view or you saw things kind of in a different way, it didn't mean that you weren't, in quotes, true to the cause. It just means you saw it differently. And I realized the best way that I could grow was to be a woman, was to live my life as if those principles mattered to me.
Mm. Mhm.
Because actions, it's often say love is not just a feeling, it's an action.
Mm.
And freedom isn't just a feeling, it's also an action,
Mm. Mm.
as many of the demonstrations in your country prove.
Mm. That's true. Yeah. Do you think as a talk show host, it is your job to respond to political changes, or is it your job to create a container that's outside of those political changes?
Well,
You are an
one,
Aquarius, and I feel like Aquarians are said to be political. So,
it's kind of funny. I have to laugh sometimes about what people want to pigeonhole Aquarians. And first of all, all it tells you is where that person's sun is. It doesn't really tell you a whole lot else about them.
five other of their planets.
I have five,
Yeah.
and of course, I'm always going to. I'm going to freely admit it. I'm always going to be contrary, but that's only because I want to make sure that I'm not just buying something hook, line, and sinker. That it actually resonates. And so, one of my greater guiding principles in life comes from the I Ching, which says if you want to change the world, you have to change yourself first.
Mm.
So, you know, um, and we humans really have difficulty being at times being authentic, and a lot of it comes from fear of change, fear of because looking at what's going on in the world, especially in Iran, and how things don't seem to be de escalating at all, and all those predictions of what 70 or 80 years ago that the next third world war would take place in the Middle East. I look at that, but I don't want to feed that fear.
Mm.
And besides, if it does happen, I have no control over it. I mean, do I want that to happen? Absolutely not. But
Mhm.
I think that the best thing we can possibly do is, and if you're called to be the people who are visibly, demonstrating, doing all that, speaking their truth, I want on my podcast, I want to speak my truth, my life experience, but I can't speak for other people. All I can do, which is my intention, is open the door to more knowing yourself and being able to navigate your life in a way that reflects what's important to you. But that can often be a challenge because sometimes I'm not sure that we've been, because it's not selfish to know what motivates you, to know what works for you, to find the path for you to express yourself in a way that is rewarding. Now, is that going to be an easy process? I don't know. I mean, I don't. We live in the third dimension. What about the third dimension? Is actually, like going to be easy every day.
Mm. Right.
And if we just accepted that fact,
You're
it might.
you're a third dimension feminist.
Oh,
I'm a fifth dimension feminist. So
and so would you tell me what the difference is, please?
my feminism happens like in my mind and like really no, I don't know. But
Well, no, I just don't look. I just show up as me. I'm not here to go. Well, I'm a woman. But also, and this could get me into some serious trouble. I don't feel the need to use pronouns. I,
mm,
I don't have any problems being a woman in a woman's body. I
mm.
and I
So you
don't.
mean like alternate pronouns for yourself? You feel like you can say she, her confidently because for you that's
Well, first of all, I think a lot of this is, and I do really respect the conversation that comes out around gender
mhm,
because for too long, and it continues, that there is this assignment of personality traits, et cetera, to your biology when your biology is your biology. And I wonder if if people born into a body that doesn't match their consciousness, um, because we seem to still assign so much stuff to gender, as in terms of that's the kind of person. I know one of my sons says to me, well, women are supposed to be soft and gentle. I said, well, that sure doesn't. And I think I'm a softie at heart,
mhm,
but I have to tell you, when I was growing up, I decided that my intelligence was one of the things that clearly defined who I was, and I sure as hell wasn't going to pretend to be stupid for anybody.
mhm. Yeah, I feel like you're an air female, which is a different gender. It's like a cerebral gender, you know.
Yeah, but you see, I think gender is just it's like if you talk about, I mean, if you're talking about Carl Jung and you talk about the animus and the anime, um, they're meant to be energies, not and so we've gotten into a discussion about that in astrology and about whether we should be using masculine and feminine. But I see, for me, masculine and feminine are not the same as gender. But
Mhm,
you know, I'm always I'm, I'm probably always going to think things through and figure out how I see it. And I think that that's the other challenge we face these days, is recognizing that just because someone doesn't see things the same way as you do doesn't mean anything other than that. And you have no control over their thought processes or their consciousness. Is it more comfortable for us to hang around with people who see the world the way we see it? Of course. But
Mm-hmm.
then maybe we don't change very much if we're always, because I have to say that all the stuff around pronouns and everything, when I resisted it, I wanted to know why I felt resistant to it. So I asked myself those questions, and I essentially just gave you that answer. But I do actually appreciate what's been done because I think on a spiritual level, its purpose was to get us to think about how we view the physical gender as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to how we view humans separate from their gender.
Yeah, the sex and gender. Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, it's talk about change. That's a big change that's happened in culture is how we, linguistically handle gender and things like that. I mean, I think there's a lot of changes, and I think some people are resistant to those changes, and some people welcome them. And I think that has to do with the charts, right? Like if you have a very mutable chart, you might be more welcoming of political changes, and if you have a fixed chart, maybe those changes are slower to integrate into your system. I feel like Aquarius is very much into thought systems.
Well, it's interesting because I've been through this twice in my life because then there was all the change in words uh, in response to the feminist movement.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the interesting thing about this, and I might get in trouble for saying,
Please get in
no,
trouble.
no, it is that it takes a lot more than changing words to change people's consciousness.
Oh, snaps to
And
yeah.
and I play with words all the time, and I absolutely words have a lot of power. I mean, I don't believe that old adage, sticks and stones can break your bones, but words can never hurt you. That's just simply not true. Um, but again, I can't decide. Like I have trouble with they, them, and their. But that's just me. Because, I mean, I am 76 years old. I'm not saying I'm not willing to adapt myself to it because if that's the way that it goes, I'm not, from my perspective, I'm not going to do anything that inhibits my capacity to communicate with other people. And just because it's uncomfortable to me and I go, what the hell? No, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean anything except I'm trying my best to adjust.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had trouble with fire person instead of fireman. And it's not like, I think that the sun rises and sets in the crack of the ass of every man on the planet.
Did you really just say that?
Yes. I have three sons. I mean, so the universe said, okay, Lesley, you
That's a lot of
decided.
sunrises and a lot of cracks.
So the universe, so Lesley, you said that you're going to live your life and in a way that reflects that you respect that you're born a woman and that you don't buy into all the gender profiles. So what did the universe send me? It sent me three boys.
Mm.
And all of them are water. And I have a match set of water signs for children.
That's crazy.
So,
Well, this is okay. I want to steer us to another type of change, which is, I mean, I have to tell you, you've changed throughout this episode. Like I've noticed with you, it takes you a bit to warm up because that part of you that's kind of shy gets kind of like at the beginning of the episode, and then when we get into like the second half, you're really cooking and you're just really flowing. I do see that change in you. Okay, so let's talk about the change that happens within us. This is unexpected or anticipated change that directly affects who we are, either physically, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually. And I think this one I just saw when you went through this kind of virus situation for a while. And I saw it as a transit. I saw it as Saturn squaring your Uranus because Saturn kind of sat and Neptune. They kind of sat square Uranus for a few months, and I was not surprised when these internal changes within you then sparked some changes in the podcast, because I think when we have change that happens within us, it should change what happens outside of us. I mean, that's what we know as astrologers, right? Is like these, so
well, and in a strange sort of way, this is not a process that's foreign to me. I don't always like it. And I will say to people, you can accept something's true, but you don't have to like it. It's because your ego's not going to like it sometimes. So when I worked at the paper, um, I would do the interviews, gather all my notes, and And along the way, the story would go in a different direction than I thought it was going to go in.
Mm.
One of my perfect examples is that I was given a task. They wanted at the paper, they wanted to do in the lifestyle section, they wanted to do a whole week of stories about relationships. And so what did they decide to do? They decided to give me the most boring topic of all.
Sex.
Well, only because I think that sometimes they just wanted to see if they could actually control me.
Oh.
Um, so I went off to do finances, and it turned out into the most interesting story because this was one of my regular contacts, and she taught all kinds of workshops and stuff to couples. She said, "Well, it's not about money; it's about what you value." So it turned into a much deeper subject than I want to buy. I want to buy lottery tickets and I want to buy a moped. It kind of, you know,
Yeah.
that's kind of how it works for me. So I can think I'm going down a particular road, and then along the way something else happens. And so I I have to honestly say that I'm fully invested in this podcast, although there are parts of me that go, have asked me, why are we doing this? I don't know what that part of me was looking for. I think it was looking for perfection. And coming into it, like you spoke to it, like I always start off a little bit verklempt.
Hmm.
Um, Look, I'm actually, and you said it yourself, I want to enjoy life. I want to continue to live my life as vitally as possible. And honestly, I think that the podcast is a lot about that. And I'm only beginning to really, really embrace that and not get stuck in my head going, well, how many segments have we got and when are we going to talk about it? you know,
Yeah.
and so that changes, really like, and I love doing these grills with you because it's
Yeah.
helping me immensely, and just to kind of show up and be myself.
Hmm. Yeah, it's really helping me too to help you continue to grow because I'm able to like for example, I chose the topic today, with a pointed, feeling of like I really want to talk about this change that you're going through. But also it's an avenue for us to just hear from you about your life and your life experience. And it's like we can meander through these topics and like wherever we really want to go. I mean, I think yeah, I think it's definitely a win-win. It's a win for us at the More Press because we get to know you, and also for me as a producer to be able to really pull you out more and more, and then also I think a process of discovery for you too. Um,
Yes.
well, okay, the last one we have one more, which is change that we initiate, and I feel like that's a big one that you're doing right now. So, what?
Oh, just you're so right. So, um, well, I mean, and I can't speak to how anybody else would be dealing with five plants in Aquarius because I've never met anybody who's born on the same day as I was.
Mhm.
I met people who were born the day before, but she had a stellium in Aquarius, but she had Mercury in Capricorn and
Moon and
something I can't remember. Oh, she had Mercury and Moon in Capricorn.
Mhm.
Completely different signature. Um, so, and by the way, if there's anybody out here who ever watches this podcast, if you were born on February 15th, 1950, I would really like to talk to you because
Leslie's looking for her Astro twin.
well, no, just I'd like to know what the experience was for them to have five plants in Aquarius, not just me. So,
Yeah.
because honestly, I think here's how much of a Pollyanna I can be. It wasn't until maybe last year that I realized, wow, I have a really difficult chart. Because, I don't see much. I mean, you can acknowledge it, but I don't really see that it's of much benefit for someone to continue to look at their chart from that point of view. If your soul chose that moment to incarnate and to take all of the energies at that moment and and physicalize them, there has to be some purpose to it. Uh, so the beauty of astrology is it can really help you understand the deeper purpose of what you're working with. I
Yeah.
mean, and you know, um, that and that's its power. Like,
Well, and I think talking about changes we initiate, and it would be, I think sometimes our chart shows us what we should be initiating. Like if you go, like let's say Mars goes through your seventh house or something, like maybe you want to initiate some relational things, or if Mars goes through your 10th house, you might want to initiate some career things. And I think, you know, as chart watchers, we're like kind of self initiators in some ways. Okay, well, we only have 1 minute. We should talk about where do people can find Astro Soup. I know it's in a lot of changes, but where can they find it if they want to watch back episodes or
well, I have a channel,
okay.
and of course, I, as always, forgot the.
It's Astro Soup and Lesley Francis. Like
Right,
like
right.
yeah.
Um, and you can always find me on Facebook too, because I usually, when I'm doing episodes, I will post them. Currently, I'm on hiatus. I'm not really sure when I will be returning. I'm kind of waiting for the awareness that it's time to begin again. Um, and still just really thinking. I know it seems crazy to think about starting another podcast when you're not even a year into the one you've already started, and it's trying to figure out how those two things might live together. I wanted to use it, things I learned from falling on my face, as a segment in the AstroSoup podcast, and of course have not determined. Like everything seems to be kind of floating, and moving from Pisces to Aries doesn't necessarily always clarify things. It can
Mhm.
tend to keep things in motion. and
Mhm. Interesting.
and I will be at Norwalk. I'll be hanging out with Andy, and also if anybody who's watching here is going to be at Norwalk, please come and say hello to me, because I have 7 planets in air signs, and I love talking to people. Talk about You can ask me a question about AstroSoup. You can ask me an astrological question, whatever. You can just
And
talk.
and and also watch for Leslie. We do have to wrap up here, but I want to say watch for Leslie on the Moyer Press channel because we're going to be doing this series of biography shows. As much as Leslie wants to be in front of the public eye over here, we will have her. So watch for her here as well.
That's dangerous. I do like to talk.
Well, it's a very good thing to have you on here. All right,
Okay,
Leslie, we love
and
you. Have a wonderful
bye,
day.
everybody.
Bye. And you know what they say? Don't ever change. All right.